Hello everybody and welcome to recording 3462 of 6000. I am going to be going over some sessions and profile properties today. And to make it real simple, I will close out my windows. So in our system we currently have a DG35 core schema. And under the schema, we have, of course, our users table that we described earlier in a different session. But this also has a password column. This password column is just a hash of the current password, so we're not storing it in plain text. So what happens during the session creation is that we actually check this hash against the actual password. I think it's SHA-256. And then from there we create this session row. Let me show you what that looks like. Since multiple users can be logged into the system at any given time, at the same time, the same username can exist twice with two different sessions. After authentication, a random GUID is created along with the session ID, so you can easily find this session by looking at the token instead of having to worry about going back and opening the session table and getting the session ID. We also have a cleanup after seconds. These are for long-lived sessions. We use those for queue services and whatnot. There is a session cleanup that runs every, I believe it's every 5 minutes, that deletes these rows out of the session table. And when they're deleted, the user is no longer will be given an error anytime that the system tries to open anything, because the first check for everything is always a session. We do have a session archive. This allows us to look at, it's the same copy of the table. This allows us to look in the past, see who's logged in when. It's more for an audit trail. And we have session properties. Don't believe they're used very much. These properties can exist. Oh yeah, it looks like they have active usernames and things. We can pull up information about that session itself, and it's just key value pairs. Generally, when we talk about properties in the second session or second part of this, is that we're not going to be using the properties in the session, but yet we're going to be using the properties at the profile level, which exist for all sessions. Another interesting piece is the session lock. This is a very important for our SBNet system, not so much for SBWeb because we've eliminated the need for locks. But sometimes when a user opens up a document, this lock will then they'll be issued a lock token. That lock token then it locks the rows in the table so nobody else can edit or modify them. And those link to a dictionary table with some key information, primary key data. There are ways to create sessions internally without authenticating. We do have a procedure called create session internal. This is for queue services that run in the background that have direct access to the database. And we'll just take a look and see what that looks like. In this particular instance, all we're doing is we're getting the hashed password from the username and then actually calling the create session, passing in the hash. Don't know why that's calling create session 1. It should be calling create session 2. But in this case, it's a very simple procedure where we're loading the information from the user table using the username. We check we check to make sure that the password matches. If it doesn't, then we actually update the failed login count, which is nice. Then we can use that for failed login checks. We also check if the account's locked after the password. So we instead of returned a GUID, we return locked as a token, just an indicator. And if, of course, they log in properly, failed count goes back to 0. We also check for a temp password. The temp passwords are used for forgot my password. It only exists for a little bit, and that's an auto-generated password. It allows them to log in and immediately change it. And we also check a few other properties. We get profile properties, which I'll get into in a second here. But this checks for that profile for that user. It checks the expiration time, the policy set by the company. That's just something that's in there. We also check if a change password is required. It then doesn't log them in with the token. It kind of forces them to change it. So that indicates to the front end, hey, change it. And then of course our session cleanup. It defaults to 600 seconds. So we have 10 minutes of active session without a tick before it blows up, but we can override that with a property by calling get profile property again. And that's it. And then there's some metadata stored in the session for the properties. Get the active usernames. That's mostly for impersonation purposes, which I won't get into here. But and then of course it does generate a new token for them as well. So that's it for sessions. I'll be getting onto properties now. Many times what we need to do is we need to control the system based on a profile property. And those profile properties either guide the system to do something, or they kind of give metadata for other actions. In this case, like for instance, a notify. Whenever the ACI notify is saved, this is the template it should use. Again, these are just name value pairs, but this is an example of the template. Now, what's cool about profiles is that there's this inherit property here. So I know that profile 78 probably has some children. Profile property, profile child, where profile ID equals 78. Let's see if it has any kids. No, it doesn't have any kids. So let's do another property that I know has some kids here. Well, I know 31 is the root profile. See what we have for base. These you would generally call policies, because I know 31's our root profile, and all of these are set to inherit. So that means these go down. So this ACI web link for client profile, no matter what you pull from, since the profile child, if you look, you see every single child, no matter how deep it is, gets returned for that profile. And there's 29,000 children for root profile 31. So what happens is that when you try to get a profile property here, I'm going to modify this procedure to show you what it looks like. What we do is a very simple query that takes the profile parent. It looks at whatever profile you're passing in. So if I don't know, go over here, I'll pass in profile ID 2021. And it needs a profile ID, property name, and an output. So we're going to look for the get profile property. We're going to pass a profile ID of 2021. And this is the profile name we want. And then we'll do a PP out. So if this works properly, there we go. It then executes this SQL statement, which joins in the profile parent, because it's always looking backwards to its parents, and then it's looking for the profile property. And if it's inheriting, then it's pulling in from the entire. It looks for depth of 0 if it's not inheriting. If it's inheriting, it doesn't care, and it's going to order by the depth. And that's the reason why it selects top one. Because if you have one over top of that, if I say, you know what, the default is this SP Web Trunk, but you know I want to override that, and I want to put something in there. Insert into D5 Core profile property, and of course we need a. Let's see. This is a cool little trick. If you're an Enterprise Manager, I'm sorry, SQL Server Management Studio, and you go to the profile property table, and I want to get a list of all these columns to kind of put in here, because you have to specify it, because that's primary key. It's auto incrementing, so you can't just use you can't just start doing that without turning identity insert on. So what I like doing is I go here. I mean, you could do this. You can go script table as insert into new query editor window. That's one way of doing it. Sometimes that doesn't work, because there's a lot of stuff you want to get these column names, you want to put them in. That's one way. Or you could just highlight columns, press Control C, and then paste them in. It's undocumented, but it's a cool little feature, and it works really good. And then I can put my values of profile ID, say 2021, which is now returning this information, but I want to return something different. So I'm going to pass this in. And I'm going to set the property value to hello Ariel. Not sure if he's going to be reading this or not. And then set the inherit to 1. And I'm going to get the data before and get the data after. And I'm going to roll back the transaction, just so I'm not changing any data in the system and harming anything. I'm going to run that. Hey, it worked. Is it I before E or E after I? I don't know. Whatever. So anyway, that's how properties work. And of course, as you know, since I rolled back, it's going to go back to where it was. But the information does inherit. I like that feature because we were able to set policies at the parent level, and then move forward. So now we have this project here, an example project, that we want to be able to add in a couple different help links. So I'm going to open this up. Bear with me while I find it. Help option, this one right here. So in this case, we have these different properties that we want to put into the system. So in that case, what I'm going to do is I'll just copy this. And for a particular test here, we're going to put in 31. And I'm going to blank that out. And oops, this is, sorry, 31 here. That's the profile ID. And we're going to inherit this property. And let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3 different property names. Help URL 1, 2, and 3. So, oops. So put that in. That in. And there's nothing really special about this. Of course, we could have made a different table to do all this, but you know, for this stuff, it's pretty easy. You know, it's pretty fast to be able to select these properties out of the system. So, for instance, watch what's going to happen when I try to insert this. Damn, forgot about that. I have to go to the properties table. The property table is the actual definition of this property. For every property in the system, you must put this definition in. So in this case, I'm going to do script table as insert into clipboard. So we need to first enter in all these different property names. So the property name itself is going to be help URL 1. Of course, we've got to do all this for everything. This is a help URL. And it's not a deployment property. That's old and obsolete. It's not a session property. It is a profile property, and it's not a user property. So in this case, we're just going to go insert our help URL 1, help label 1. Actually, I'll just do both. There's 2. And we've got a label, help URL, display text. What I'm doing is I'm highlighting and pressing F5, if you don't know that already. And we have the help icon. Okay, so now we have them all. Now I should be able to insert all of these. Now I have them in as blank right now. We can do that to default them, or we can put something in there as a HTTP for testing purposes. www.helpmenow.com, and the label is help me now label 1. And this would be help me icon. You know, the original thought was we would just put an FA or a font awesome icon. So I guess we could just put whatever font awesome icon for right now. I'll just leave it blank. And we could do the same thing here, just for default values. Help me now, and we could put help me now label 2 for testing. That's weird. 0 rows affected. 1, 2, 3, 4. I wonder why. Let's just make sure that those got into the system. They should have. Actually, I already have this up here, this query. One and 2, and there's our data. So now when we select this, right out of here, if I look for help label 1, oops, Help label 1. I know it's really sloppy, but you're following. Help label 2. There we go. All done. We've got these parameters added, so thank you very much for watching this ever so entertaining video.